Swift Stop Now, and I'm here with Brittany Sensenig, who I've known for 20-something years. I shouldn't go to the exact date, Bishop might get mad at me. And we're here to talk about a very serious topic about domestic violence and a issue that is very important to Brittany with Caitlin's law, that trying to get legislation passed for that. And I will let Brittany go into more about that and what that entails and how the movement came about. Oh, and by the way, how are you today, Brittany?
I'm good. It's been a nice day so far. Yes, I'm Brittany Sensenig, and I formed Caitlin's Law with a few of my friends at the 1-year anniversary for Caitlin. She was my best friend of about 8 or 10 years, somewhere around there. She was murdered in 2014, right before Thanksgiving, by her fiance. And I won't do a lot of the details, but she was stabbed to death. And I believe they counted over 90 stab wounds. And that kind of got it started on, what could have prevented this, I think was the biggest question, but more so, what can I do to honor her and all the things that she had done in her lifetime? And, she was a helper. She helped people all the time. And this is the best way I need to honor her. Plus, it's just a common sense change that needs to be made. It would make the courts a lot less full. It would weed out the ones that would, cancel out those protective orders and charges and things like that. Free up some of the criminal court so that people don't have to press charges to get an immediate protective order, if the courts are closed. But that's the general idea of it. I want to just alter the protective order law just a little bit, because we have all of the counties around us, except for us and another 2 counties locally, that do not allow magistrates to process restraining orders the same way they would criminal charges.
Yeah, and we're in eastern North Carolina, and Craven County, Pitt County, and Pamlico, and the murder happened in Pitt County, where I live, in the Greenville area where East Carolina University is. And those counties don't allow magistrates to do that, but other counties close by, Jones, Duplin, Sampson, and Onslow, which are all smaller than Pitt and Craven, I believe. It's a little bit different when you think about.
It's surprising that Jones County would allow it, but I guess their courts are so small that it made sense for them to do that. But it should be the same across the board. If I let's say I lived in Jones County, but the incident happened in Craven County, how would that affect one another? There's a lot of questions that I have raised over the years that pertain to this. The main thing, though, is that courts, when they get closed due to inclement weather or something like COVID, when courts were closed, and majority of them were anything that was important or needed to be handled quick. That's not one of those things that needs to be handled so quickly in a lot of eyes, unfortunately. I think the general assumption is that it's just a piece of paper. It's not actually going to protect you, but it can in a lot of ways protect that person. Just as an example, if myself and my significant other got into an argument and it became physical, and I called the police, we have both of our names on this home. And let's even say that we're married, but only my name is on the home. Because this is a really good example as well. They can ask him to leave, but he doesn't have to leave. If there's no markings or anything like that on you, and they can't press criminal charges, they'll suggest that tomorrow morning when the courts open up, unless it's a Saturday, then you'll have to wait till Monday morning when the courts open up to go in and file to request a hearing for a judge. Let's hope they can get you into the court that week. Sometimes it might take a week, and that's if everything's moving normally. Usually they try to do it within a few days. but it can take some time to get that first hearing. There's all this time. And with domestic violence cases, 1 week is a lot of time, especially if that person knows that you're leaving or knows that you are trying to do any of this stuff. So it's just a really dangerous thing. If you can go in and get a temporary protective restraining order directly from a magistrate at any time of the day or evening or night or on a Saturday or a Sunday, or if it's a holiday or the courts are closed for any reason, there is always a magistrate on site. And if our neighboring counties are doing it, why can't we? We have a higher population here in Craven County, and we also have the numbers to prove that it is necessary, especially with courts being closed. And you've got all of these organizations and shelters that are overran trying to help people, and they can't because they only have resources and they have to get into that court system, and they're at the mercy of them.
Another good point is that courts close down for every federal holiday, and there's probably a lot more federal holidays than people realize, because people typically only know the ones they get off for work or school for, but there's a lot more than those. And I also think that's just an issue. I mean, because a lot of it's, looking at it, it just seems to be common sense, because if you look at, if someone is at the point where they need to file a domestic restraining order, whether it's a male, female, or someone that's non-binary, if they're at that point, it's probably pretty bad that they're wanting, like, I need protection from this person, I'm in fear for my life. And most of those are going to be women, and people really think, like, if it's something's closed on the weekend, like stuff like domestic violence and those kind of issues don't stop because it's a weekend and everyone else is away from work. So, and this is a taxpayer paid thing, and women are taxpayers. So it's like, why would you?
I'm a taxpayer.
not have that available? And I mean, honestly, going through the history of women's rights over the last 100 years in the United States, where just in like the 60s and 70s, women were allowed to have debit cards or give money out of a bank and file for divorce, and all this stuff has happened in the past like 60, 65 years. Then, and especially when
women couldn't even take birth control without their husband's permission from, like, directly to the doctor. So even their own medical care was, I mean, we were essentially children for. I mean, my grandma didn't have the right to vote. I mean, my grandma, that's it. Within my life, her lifetime, she was not allowed to vote. She was an adult before she got the ability to go to a voting booth. And she was so scared that she didn't vote the first time that she had the ability to, because of the area. I was not super excited about, having that for them. So she didn't even vote the first round. She waited till the second one. And that was the first time she voted. So even the first time that she had the opportunity, she was too scared to do it because fear of judgment, things like that. So that carries into the world today. And I think it's pretty even on both sides. Men do experience it too. We have a lot of different communities that experience it. And sometimes you don't even need a protective order against the person that you're in a relationship with. So there could be a number of reasons why you need one. And children and their safety is a lot of the reason why people will even get to that point of going to go get one, just to make sure that on a custody level that their kids are protected, because a lot of the times they're used like pawns, like it's like pawns in a game, and it's unfortunate, but these are the types of things that really do protect people. And the timeline is very fast. It's almost like anytime you have something like that happen, once the clock starts ticking, it's like you only have so much time before things can get, you've seen it time and time again. I mean, how many documentaries have you seen on Dateline?
Yeah, and I think that's a good time to point out, like the National Library of Medicine did a recent study in, I believe it was September, and they found 1 in 3 women over the age of 18 are going to experience domestic violence in their life, and 1 in 10 men. And annually, they found that domestic violence is responsible for 1,500 deaths in the United States.
Well, and I've got this actually pulled up right now from the North Carolina violence organization, and it's NCA, Victim Services, contraction of sexually transmitted, a staggering number. You can sit in the room with 10 of your male friends, and at least one of them has had a severe case. And that's crazy. That's crazy to me that many people would experience something like that on a daily basis.
Yeah, and it's a thing that I don't think it's taken anywhere near serious enough, and it's
the courts are not on their side.
Well, yeah, the courts don't even want to be open on Saturday and Sunday.
I think that people think that most people they get all these emotions heightened up, and they're just really emotional, and maybe if they sleep it off, they'll calm down, everything will be okay. It was just a intense moment, and that's it. And I think that's a lot of the reason why people don't take it seriously, because they see so many women go back, and they don't take into account all of the reasons why they might feel like they have to, or they have no other choice but to go back. And a lot of the times it's having contact. And one of those things the protective order stops is contact. So again, that time elapsing of not having it and not having that no contact is pertinent to keeping the person away from them, having resources available, of course. And that's not really the entire basis for Caitlin's Law. I really want to just open the door for people to have education on it and know the steps, and know that the county that they live in, they can't just go to the magistrate's office at any time of day and say, hey, I need this. They're going to be advised to press charges in order to get an instant protective order with those charges, especially if they're violent. You have proof, things like that. But if you talk to a lot of these victims, they don't want to give the person a criminal record.
Yeah, I mean,
that's going to anger that person so much more. And let's say they bond themselves out. I've had a couple of people where they've told me that they pressed charges, the person was served, but they didn't get arrested. They went and turned themselves in when they knew that they could bond themselves out. So let's say they go, they would have gotten served on a Friday night. They would have been taken to jail and would have had to spend the night for the weekend and go to court Monday morning for a bond hearing. Whereas if they go to turn themselves in, they can do a quick bond hearing and bond themselves out, and they're right back out on the street. But now they have charges pressed against them. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but it's pretty upsetting to get criminal charges pressed on you. And especially if there's jail time, probation, things like that. Like, it's going to affect your job, especially when it's a violent charge like this. Some people don't want the trouble. They just want to feel safe. They want to know that when they call the police to say, hey, this person is showing up, they're here, they're going to hurt me, they're not going to get an officer showing up to listen to their stories and say, hey, you need to leave. They're just going to have to go to jail because they broke the no contact order. That's it. It's just such a simple thing. And it makes no changes to anyone's positions in the court system to have extra work to do. It's not going to cost extra monies. You're not going to have to worry about rerouting an entire system to do this. It's simply a redirection and opening the door to say, hey, you can press charges on someone, and now you can offer this as a temporary, just the same way as you get a court date for a criminal charge once you are processed with a magistrate. It's the same thing. Here's your court date. You need to show up on this date. You need to show up with whatever proof you have. At a magistrate, whenever you're pressing charges, you have to provide proof. And he determines whether or not it's enough to press charges. Why does he not have the ability to offer a temporary restraining order in the same sense? They have access to the same systems, court dockets, things like that. There's no reason why that shouldn't be done. And I think there's a lot of politics involved, because I haven't ever been able to get a clear answer as to why this can't be done.
I mean, I think the situation.
I was told actually by a judge that knew Caitlin from the time that she was a child, when talking about this and asking if he would write a sort of letter of recommendation for this bill so that it could be taken seriously, for someone to draft it into a real bill that could be presented. And he wouldn't back it because he feels the law is just and it works, and it has always worked, and it will continue to work. And I need to hang this up. And that is a direct quote. And I'll never forget that sentence a day in my life. Because if the law was just and it worked, then why has the crime rate risen drastically?
Yeah, that's, that's,
The law is not rehabilitating anybody.
that's just kind of funny to hear that because if laws were working, because like most data shows that most perpetrators and victims do not seek help, and I would assume a lot of the reason why victims do not seek help is because of how difficult it can be. Like, I don't personally see any reason as to why someone who can't realize that maybe you shouldn't just beat someone up because you get a little bit mad doesn't deserve a criminal charge. But
It
if the
stems
system
from
isn't going,
childhood, and almost every single person that is an abusive person, if you look at their past history, almost always it's a childhood trauma in some way, shape, or form. It's an abusive, they experience sexual abuse, developed connection. And you could really delve into the psychology behind why these people become abusive as adults. But that's really the root of the problem. It's not necessarily that, I know that most people think that jail is going to rehabilitate people, but it's not. They learn more and they get smarter when they come out. And 9 times out of 10, if you're a violent offender, you're going to be a repeat violent offender. I, for one, have seen one case I'm going to use it as an example. And this is actually one of the cases where if you look at our Facebook page, we're pretty quiet, but this is actually the one that caused me to have, because once you learn so many things, it's like, and you see how disappointing the system is for victims, real victims, and on how many are, because this would be vindictive. What was the percentage of people that have been found to be dishonest? It was like 2%.
Well, it's when it gets to like a legal case, it'll be between. I've seen studies that it basically falls.
Yeah, it was like 1.9%, something like that.
It'll be like between 2 to 8% will have lied about the charges if it gets to all the way up to like a court case. So it basically means between 92 and 98% are telling the truth. So it's a very high rate of honesty in that case. But a lot of people will try to use to, it's like, what if so-and-so is lying? And it's like, that is very rare when it gets to that far where we're sitting in a court. That doesn't happen that often.
Court and deal with just the process of even getting into the courtroom. Who's going to go through all of that for a lie? Except forget to say that, because that really kind of shows. And it's very simple because, if you lie under oath, they can criminally charge you for that. So just use that as the tool. If the person is found to be lying, use that as the tool to squash that one little rebuttal that is a drop in the ocean of stories that you hear on a daily basis in family court. And family court is the majority of their cases that they see on a daily basis involves some form of domestic violence. You can go sit in any day in there. Usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays are their busiest days for family law and divorce and things like that. Almost every single one has some form of domestic violence. I get the civil calendar to my email every week, and 3 or 4 pages worth of names on the docket for one day. And more than 50% of them are domestic violence or have some form of protective order, ex parte. Yeah, that's astounding. We're not even that large of a county, and that's just us. That doesn't include any other county. That's just us. So anyway, so the case that did it was it was a family in Vanceboro, and she had sought out help multiple times, so much so as to go to a shelter. And in that process, they were full. They were too full, but they allowed her to stay there for a short duration. I think it was not even a week. She ended up having to go back. There was no room anywhere else. And this is January of 2021.
So pretty much during
So all this
yeah.
It was like, yeah, I mean, and we'd had that second spike that lasted a few months that was just really bad for a little while. And then it tapered down again. And then we had another spike in the summertime, I think last year. But the part, the husband, I'm not sure if they were married. I don't want to say that and be wrong. They were together for a while. They had 3 children. And one of them was a baby. And they had a dog. They lived in Vanceboro, which is a smaller town in Craven County. She had sought out the help and ended up having to go back. And I guess she thought that maybe things would be okay. And, there was drug use on his part. He worked on a boat. So, he had some drug use that was talked about, specifically methamphetamine and cocaine. So those two just by itself can lead to psychosis, and they can make abusers 10 million times worse. But he knew she was trying to leave, and it made things very volatile for her. And she didn't have like a lot of family that she could go and stay with temporarily or anything like that. So he gets home, and I'm not sure if there was an argument or anything like that, but she is on the couch feeding the baby. And he proceeded to shoot all of them, including the baby, the dog, and then himself. And that getting involved in that and volunteering to raise money for the family. I mean, they're not just burying one person. And there was, the mother was just on disability and things like that. So it was kind of like the case that really kind of caused me to have to really take a step back, because it's so disappointing to see how bad everything has gotten. And it mentally drained me so bad to know that she sought out help, and the people knew that he was using drugs, and people should use their better judgment to know that that's like a game of Russian roulette. You never know what you're going to get. It could be good one day and take a turn in a second. Just wonder if the courts were open, and they weren't so backlogged, or if they had the ability to transfer that power to the magistrates when they knew the courts would be closed for extended amounts of time. You've got people isolated for months on end, constant fear all the time. The economy's going to crash. Everything's going to crash. That amount of stress has been proven to cause long-term issues. Cortisol, all that causes issues. If you're already got the drug use going on, it was just a perfect storm, and it could have been prevented. And I feel like if the courts weren't backed up, and she would have been able to get the help she needed to get her and her 3 children to safety, knowing the situation was what it was, she would probably be alive today, and so would her 3 children and their dog. And they're not.
That situation just makes me think. I guess this would be a very difficult process to do, but it almost seems like in cases like that, there shouldn't be a need for the victim to technically press charges. That person, and there's proof of that. There's literally proof of that. Why can't we have a system in place where that person has to be removed from the situation no matter what the ownership they have over a house? They have to go somewhere else, whether it's
especially with children involved. They don't ask to be there. They don't ask for that.
I don't know why a known abuser that they can prove, whether there's a court case or not, needs to technically be there, whether there are charges being pressed by the victim or not. Like, the state knows, and the state knows this person might be violent. Well, the state knows this person is violent. They literally know that. And in some cases, I've heard where abusers will lose their rights to firearms for situations like that. And I just don't know why, if the state knows someone is violent, why they aren't removed from the people they're being violent with, where they go. figure that out. Whether, I mean, technically you can't keep them in custody forever, but they
Well, I mean,
should.
all of them go back because they have no family around, which is gonna be a problem with housing. Most people do not have even $1,000 in their savings account for emergency money, let alone $500. A majority, I would say, majority of people do not have even $500 in their savings accounts
Right.
for emergency situations like this to just get up and get out. Let's say that this guy has tailored you down to taking care of your kids so long that you haven't worked because you've been a stay-at-home mom.
That's what I'm saying. Why the state should remove.
How are you supposed to leave?
That's
You
why
know,
the
and if we're
abuser
gonna remove children from homes to go into foster care, and we're gonna pay people a stipend every month to take care of these children, why can we not provide the same kind of service for the moms to get into better situations? You know what I mean? I mean, if I'm paying taxes, I would rather it be used to actually help people.
I mean, like almost in this situation.
And that is an emergency situation, and I feel like there should be emergency money for that. And of course, that is for another day. We'll tackle that beast another day, but definitely something I wish we could jump on.
I think this
even if it was just having safe homes, more safe homes, because you know, you have a safe home for too long, those abusers are going to find out that that's a safe home eventually, and are they going to be safe anymore? And a lot of times they're just houses that they buy, like foreclosure homes. Volunteers come in and fix them a little bit, but they're just regular homes. They're not gated. They're not secure a lot of the time. They're secure like a regular house. And there's only so much funding to really secure those houses. So there's just so many things. There's just like a huge door of things that people really don't look into or understand when it comes to this. Like, you know, they do fundraisers and raise all this money, but it's like they need vehicles to transport these victims safely and their families. The safe house. I mean, how many houses do you know that are affordable for something that's going to have to be funded, even if it is at an auction? Usually it's going to be 3 or 4 bedrooms max. They'd need 4 or 5 of those just to even put a dent in the need for it. And even if it's just temporary, there's so many little temporary situations. They let them stay there temporarily. They help them get their jobs and all the things, help them get any kind of resources they need while they're there to get them set up to leave, so they don't go back. And we don't have that in these emergency situations. But if we can just get them to transfer the power for the magistrates to do that, I think we'd be moving in a better direction. And
because basically what that would do, that would basically say, I mean, because that's kind of what I was getting at. The abuser would have to not make communication or go elsewhere. You have to be elsewhere. I mean, honestly, I would like those people.
And you have to provide some sort of evidence to show that this is why you need it when you go to a magistrate. It's the same thing as pressing charges. You have to show them proof. Why do you need this? Why do you feel so in fear of your life? Well, here, let me show you everything I have. And they make the determination to press charges. Why can they not? You know, it's like I've asked myself this question for 7 years. I don't understand it. There's no way that anybody can explain it to me why our county and our 2 neighbors do not have this ready to go. And I'm not sure if it's just politics or if it's the way that these communities have come up and we're behind on the times and or the law is just, but it's just common sense, and it's not going to cost any money.
In a place like Pitt County, where it's a college community and the average age of the population is much lower than the
18 to 25.
It's like that doesn't make any sense.
Jam-packed with really, really emotional first relationships. Yeah.
And a lot of people want to talk about the alcohol and party scene. And it's like, but when you have stuff like this going on and that kind of thing is there, you don't. I would think mayors, legislators in the area don't care that much because you could change it to fix it. I mean, that's a bit harsh. And I mean, I have planned on talking to some of the politicians in the city of Greenville about stuff. But I mean, that's something I can bring up because it just seems really odd. I mean, it's very odd because I think if you bought it to
It is.
with the population here, they would be like, yeah, we should do that. Um,
Well, and even Caitlin being, a Greenville native for so many years at that point. I mean, she went to Greenville pretty fast after graduating. So, I mean, they have a scholarship fund in her name at Pitt Community College, um, which is great. But it's like they see these things all the time. They have that for her. That was a major story. Why have they not entertained the idea? I mean, even if it's just entertaining the idea, I just they just think everything works just fine. But it's like, how much would this free up the court? Let's say they show up to court and they just dismiss it. You don't have people sitting and clogging up criminal court. We have so redirecting protective orders to pressing charges because people are desperate. That's what they are going to have to do if they really need it bad enough now.
yeah, and it just seems like
instead of waiting for a court date to maybe get that protective order granted.
it just seems like now it's just. I mean, I guess what are some of your goals? I mean, is it more trying to get laws passed on the local level? Because it seems like this needs to be something. Because I doubt every state it has this right.
If I can just get it done here, I want to go all the way up, because this should be a nationwide thing. I mean, if a magistrate in any state can press charges, file charges, set a court date, review your evidence that you have in order to charge that person. That should just be a given all the way across the board. I mean, laws like that should really match up from state to state. I can understand, laws that you have to take into consideration your environment, your demographics, things like that. I understand that. This is not a demographic problem. This is not a population problem. It's not an environment. I mean, all of those things obviously take in, factors, but all the way across the board, it doesn't matter what area of the United States you're in. That should just be a normal thing. That would be the long-term goal. But first, I got to get these very hard-headed people to listen.
I mean, what's some of the other pushback that you've received regarding Caitlin's law?
That was the main one. The other one is we can't just keep adding laws. It's gonna just clog everything up and make everything confusing, and it'll end up opening a loophole somewhere else. And I'm just like,
that's not how
redirecting it. There's no change. It's just a redirection. There is no change. Okay, follow along. No change. Redirection. That's it. There's no monies involved, nothing like that. They're already sitting there doing that 24/7. It really is common sense. And I think people just think that, yes, they think that, they've heard all these stories of their friends getting taken advantage of in court for child support, or, women are crazy. That's another one. I think that they think that I'm always talking about women in these situations, and it's definitely not the case. My brother has had some situations where I had to kind of step up as the sister, because he obviously can't do anything about it. And this was a long time ago, so this is not who I am now, but I've definitely watched my brother deal with some things that would 100% be categorized as being in that family of domestic violence, even if it was, 12 years ago, 13 years ago. It happens for them too. So it's not even just a case of like women are crazy and we need to focus on that. It's across the board for both.
Yeah, I can't take
honestly
can't take anyone seriously who responds to like domestic abuse or child support. Like, women are crazy. It's like, maybe well, I can't say that. Okay, I'm glad I stopped myself. But it's like, maybe you're not mature. Let's put it that way. Because it's like, that's just
things that people just don't actually read into it and learn about how the process works. People think that what they go on, they read the internet and they're like, oh, you got to do this, 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 and this. And I'm like, okay, come walk with me and let's do it together. I'm going to show you how absolutely ridiculous this entire process is, because it's never going to be the same every time you go. You're going to have a different clerk in the court that you're dealing with whenever you're trying to file your paperwork. You're going to get redirected to the women's shelter when you go down there by yourself because you need an advocate with you to do it.
Yeah, it just seems.
Did you know that?
I did not know that.
I had taken someone. I had taken someone. I wasn't an official advocate from the women's shelter locally here, but I was a volunteer. I took her down there because I knew the process. I knew how to do it. I knew exactly what paperwork to ask for. I knew exactly how to file it. I had this, like, I know exactly what we're doing. I'll take you down there really quick because it'll be faster than having to go all the way up there, get someone, and come all the way back. Didn't realize that I had to go do that anyway. So we got all the way to the courthouse. I'm talking, it's Friday afternoon, weekend of the Mum Fest. I don't know if you know. That whole area is getting ready to get completely closed off, and we're not going to be able to get back in. And I think it was about 3:30 in the afternoon. So they're probably going to close a little bit early that day because it's the Mum Fest, and that's so much more important. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be sarcastic, but realistically speaking, like, this kind of crazy. But
for those who don't know,
we have the magistrate.
It's a big thing, and
15 to 20,000 people in the streets.
Yeah.
And the courthouse is actually right in the square of our downtown area. It's like right there at the corner, one of the main corners where they have everything. And it starts getting set up on a Friday. So towards the end of Friday, those streets starts getting closed down for, street dining and things like that.
No, yeah, and they pretty much it's just, that's the thing that just confuses me. It's like people will say it's so hard to change, like a legislation like this. I've had to read bills from federal Congress, which are very, very long, and actually some bills and legislations are like a couple of pages. This could be like a page. It's like, what loophole?
I don't even think it would fill up a page at this point. There's no sub clauses or anything. It would probably be maybe one paragraph with maybe one sub clause to it, and that's it. And that sub clause would probably just define something to make sure that nobody got it confused. I mean, it would really be that simple. And I've got so many little cases that I ended up finding the other day when I was looking through some of my Caitlin's Law content that I would, because I ended up reading so many different domestic violence cases that I wanted to find one that matched up to what I was trying to do, where it's like, definitively, this person would be alive if they had this option. And so I found some of them, and I'll have to send those over to you for you to look at. But this was 7 years ago, and nothing has changed. It's gotten a lot worse. The divorce rate is at an all-time high. And then with a lot of those divorces, domestic violence was involved. But that's because the state of the world is the way it is. And when there's high stress situations, the economy is suffering, everything's happening the way it is, you're going to see a rise in those things. And if we just had that one little redirection, it might unclog our court system a little bit so that the criminal court can focus on what it needs to focus on, and family court can have those processed a lot faster. It would really make everything run a little smoother, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's also the scary thing about this, because like what the National Library of Medicine found that the non-fatal domestic violence rate is declining recently because of decreases in marriage rate and like people not being married as much and better domestic violence shelters and everything like that. But it's still,
are they absolutely certain that the number isn't declining because less people are reporting it? Well, because the courts have been closed. I mean, that could be really the real reason.
I mean, that's always the thing with everything, because you can't track what's not reported. That's my background.
And that's the thing. And if it's gonna, I've taken three different women to go try to do this, taking them straight to the women's shelter. Exactly what we need to do. I'll stand with you the whole time, even if I'm not the one that's your advocate going. I'm still going to go with you, just to walk you through it. You're comfortable, whatever. And they listened to the entire process and decided not to go through with it because it's just too much, and they can't handle it. Because a lot of the times, which is what I just read, they have end up with post-traumatic stress disorder if they're in a long-term it turns into complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is much more severe than regular post-traumatic stress disorder from like a singular event. And in those situations, a lot of them will shut down when things seem lengthy, the process seems long. It seems like too much, it's too hard. They have so much going on, they're drowning, right? That's not something that they're going to want to have to go through. Whereas if they could just go to the magistrate, instead of having to do the back and forth thing, they could just go straight to the magistrate by themselves without having to go get an advocate, to get questioned, fill out all that paperwork, then go down to the courthouse, stand at the clerk's office, try to get a court date. And then you might have a court date that day if you're lucky. They could squeeze you right in. Might be the next day, might be 3 or 4 days later. It might be 2 weeks from now. It just depends on how backed up they are. What's the holiday? Is there a pandemic going on? I mean, there's just so many things. And we have hurricanes too. So during hurricanes, courts might be closed for 2 weeks, a month. I'm not even really sure how long it was closed after Florence, but I know they got severely backed up from that. Once they started finally leveling out and getting caught up, pandemic hit and they were right back, except it was so much longer than that. And it was so much worse than that.
What is the paperwork you mentioned? Is that like filing out like a criminal report? Like what exactly is in that paperwork?
Which ones?
The one where you said where they have to go and fill out at the court itself?
So at the court itself, at the clerk's window, they get if you have children, you're going to get like an ex parte order so that you can have temporary custody. That saves you from having to worry about, in some situations, the abuser will pick up the kids from daycare, school, whatever, and they'll take off. And now you've got essentially a kidnapping. So that is usually one for if there's kids involved. The others they're gonna want you to detail out what forms of domestic violence it was. So you're gonna have to write in incidents and specific. They usually want specific details like dates, times, and with abuse victims, 9 times out of 10, in that stress, a lot of times they're not going to remember exact dates and times. They're not going to remember to take notes and write it all down so they don't forget.
Yeah,
let's say it's high stress for months on end and you don't even know. You just know it's been a whirlwind for 3 months straight. You have no idea how many things happened. You just know that it's been horrible for you and you want to try to tell as much as you can, but you can't remember exact dates. They're going to want you to do that. Well, go through your text messages, see if you can figure out the dates. I sat for 2 hours filling out paperwork with someone trying to remember dates and broke down crying. It's like, I can't do this. This is too much.
I mean,
but she had 3 text messages threatening to kill her in her sleep. And she still had to pull out dates and times and everything else for all the other stuff in order to file it. Because she didn't want to press charges. She didn't want to press charges because she was like, if he ends up losing his job because of these charges, that will be, the thing that'll be the reason why I die. So just an ex parte order for no contact, just for her to heal, just for her to get where she needs to go, and to feel safe, and to know that, if she shows up at her job or anything like that, he'll be arrested. Just for her to do that, she has to go through all of these steps. And a lot of them will give up halfway through. They'll be like, I can't do this. And it's usually because there's underlying like mental health issues that have arisen from abuse. It's just a terrible cycle all the way around. And a simple redirection could really help a lot of it. And as many times as I've heard people say, like, it's just a piece of paper, it's just a piece of paper. It's like, what you guys don't realize though, if they show up at your house, you guys have the house together, they're just going to tell him to leave. And let's say he doesn't want to leave. They're going to ask you if you can leave. And it's going to go back and forth until somebody decides to leave. And usually they'll come right back after the police are gone. And then what are you going to do? But if you have that piece of paper, they'll pick him up. They'll pick him up and he'll have to spend the night in jail. And at least you have enough time to get your stuff and get out if you need to, or make a plan.
Yeah, I just think that's where this state failed, because I don't know anyone that goes through like that wouldn't go through that much traumatic events would be like, I know the exact date and time this happened, and it's not going to bother me to bring up.
They don't.
And it seems
And
like
a lot of them suffer memory loss from
Mm.
high levels of cortisol being released for such a prolonged period of time causes brain damage. Psychology has proven that. But you also suffer memory loss because your brain has this amazing defense mechanism. And when you experience something extremely traumatic, it's like protecting you from that emotional stress. And a lot of times they'll have like a blackout period then, where they're not going to remember exactly what happened. Something extremely traumatic happened. They don't know what it is though. Let's say that she's all banged up and bruised up, but can't tell you exactly what started it, what escalated it, how long it occurred, exactly where he hit you, how he hit you. I mean, that's the kind of details they ask for.
Jesus.
I mean, and the re-traumatization in the courtroom is usually where people give up and they're just like, oh, what's the point?
I mean, I think that's kind of where the state kind of fails victims, because if someone literally has a text message from that person that says, I'm going to kill you in your sleep, that's where it shouldn't even really be about like pressing charge. That should be about this person made this threat. We need to get that person somewhere else, whether that's in the custody and get the victim to safety, because this is a literal threat. I live with them. I can kill you in your sleep, which is a thing that happens far too much. And it's like that just feels like there needs to be a mechanism to fix situations like that.
But if she took it to a magistrate and showed the magistrate that press charges like that.
Yeah, and it's just, I don't know. I
mean, it's just that one little thing being shifted could be the start of really kind of trying to transition this and clean it up, because when you know better, you do better, and we know better now, and we're still operating off of laws that do not work for our times now, and that's really just the basis of it. These laws that were just and worked so well for us for so many years, they don't work. We're in a new day and age where we've got technology out the wazoo. We understand psychology so much better. We understand really where a lot of these issues begin, and it's usually always with trauma, and it doesn't even matter what kind of trauma it is. That's usually where it stems from. If we can just do this one little thing, maybe we can save 50% of the people that don't make it. That would be a beautiful goal. If it saves even 10 people in this county, it was worth it.
Maybe I shouldn't say this, but it just feels like it's a bunch of baby boomers who are male don't want to change a certain specific thing because that's against the good old boy way, which unless you're from the South, you're not really going to understand what I just said. But but it just feels like that there's just no reason to make that.
You just said that term, and I swear it just triggered the depths of my rage, because yes, and for another day, and that's an entire I have a beautiful story that I would love to tell one day when I finally am ready. But my mom and I have a massive amount of experience in that, which is why I understand why I need to be careful with my words.
Yeah.
And also why I had to kind of take a step back for a little while, because I was kind of doing a lot of this footwork on my own, and I started getting a little bit nervous about the perception that people would have of me after hearing that from a judge's mouth. Is this going to make these older men, these good old boys, is it going to make them mad?
Of course,
because it's more of an ego. It's an ego thing at this point. I hit his pride a little bit by questioning the law. Even though I'm not questioning the law, I'm just simply stating that the magistrate having the power to criminally charge people with felonies should be able to grant a temporary protective order until the court date. You're just issuing a court date and you're telling them no contact for 7 to 15 days, 30 days. And the judge can do away with it if he doesn't deem it necessary after hearing both sides. But it also prevents one person from having to go to court, saying what they have to say, and then him deciding, okay, we'll give you another court date, and then both of you are going to come back and do this all over again. it turns into multiple court dates instead of just one court date, both of you show up together. And if he doesn't show up, then the protective order gets granted. So simple.
It's not a difficult process. That's why I pretty much said what I said there. It's just, there's a reason why some people in the county wouldn't want to make that change. Pitt County makes no effing sense because it's a college town. That doesn't make sense. I don't know. I can't even touch that.
Craven and Pamlico. I mean, Pamlico more than Craven. I can really understand why, but
yeah, it's another story.
But they're like two peas in a pod. They're like two peas in a pod, though. Yeah, and I mean, Pitt County is just a larger version. I mean, Pitt County is basically New Bern and Craven County, but the only difference is it has a college. If we had a college, it would be exactly the same. Like Vanceboro would be Aiden for us. You know what I mean? It's exactly the same. The people, the law, all of it. The system in general, the lack of real help and resources for people that do actually need it. It's really sad.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, well, we've talked about a lot of the negative, but what are some of the groups who have been positive in helping you with feelings, whether national groups or local groups?
Well, Candace Parker specifically, she was one of the advocates with the, well, she basically did all of the, events and marketing and fundraising and things like that. So she was an amazing help getting this out there initially. So Candace Parker was the original person that I was basically cherry picked, and I started volunteering with the women's shelter when she was there. She is now director with a food bank here in Eastern North Carolina. So she's still in the nonprofit sector, but she's just gone on to do different things. And but the women's shelter here locally in Craven County is the one that I've worked with the most, and they've helped me tremendously. Even have had the director in the past talk me down from a full on wanting to just go on the news and spew how I really felt on the inside to everybody in this court system and why they were so stuck in their ways. Great place, and they do really try everything they can try, and they do everything they can do, and it really stinks because they can only do so much with what they're given. Which is why it's important to try to volunteer with these things. Put yourself on a sign-up sheet to volunteer. Every extra hand counts. And then Christmas comes around. They do, adopting families. You can adopt families to spend Christmas on. And 9 times out of 10, those gifts are necessities, not necessarily something fun that they want. It's just bare minimum. New sneakers. They haven't had new sneakers in 3 years. Little things like that. I think one time this girl said that she wanted her own toothbrush, but she wanted an electric one. A toothbrush on a Christmas list. That's like, I never saw that before, and never saw it before. So if that's the first organization, Promise Place is going to be the other one. They do a little bit more than just the domestic violence part of it. They also deal with sexual assault. So that one kind of covers mainly sexual assault, and it's also a counseling center. And then we have like RCS and the food bank, of course, that do partner up with the women's shelter quite frequently to kind of assist with those families. So those are my big 3.
What was the name of the first one?
It's the women's shelter, the local women's shelter here. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely good to hear because there are a lot of organizations, and yeah, I'm going to be definitely reaching out to something like, yeah, some people will probably watch this like, you're not really being all that neutral and impartial. I was like, am I supposed to be when we're talking about domestic violence? Ask yourself.
I'm extremely opinionated in only a few subjects, but when this is very toned down for me, very, very, very toned down for me. If you were to talk to me about this in person, where I didn't have to worry about backlash or cancel culture, which it wouldn't even be anybody that matters at this point anymore. They don't have much time left on this earth. But I'm very opinionated on this, and I'm trying to keep it super toned down. And this is very neutral. This is very neutral.
Oh, I was talking about for anyone wanting to question how I conducted the interviews. Like, yeah, I'm not going to be exactly like, maybe we should be neutral about domestic violence. Maybe not. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should not be neutral about domestic violence. That's
No, and I think that's the one thing that people are lacking is being passionate about something. Be passionate about something that actually does good for people, and not something that's just generic marketing strategies. This is something that's very near and dear to my heart, and it's common sense. It really is a common sense. It's the smallest change. It doesn't affect anybody monetarily speaking. Adding extra workload to anyone, I feel like it's actually going to make their jobs a little bit easier.
yeah. And before we
Not
wrap
so
up,
many extra. I mean, because you're talking about extra court dates here too at that. And so is it clogged up because they're having to come in multiple times for court dates and hearings and having to give a whole entire statement and provide evidence to a judge and all that stuff, then come back with the abuser and do the same thing again? I mean, that to me is the reason why it's clogged up. This could free up some of that time. They're taking 2 court dates and turning it into 1.
and before we
And
do wrap up,
sometimes it's more than that.
I did want to mention like the biggest federal law that went to help this was the Violence Against Women Act in 1994, which, when you really think about it, this took to 1994 to make domestic violence a federal crime, which is like that's not that long ago. And so that's kind of where we're at, and the federal government hasn't really retouched things like this really in a way like the Violence Against Women Act did back in 1994. And
And I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot more violence since I was 4 years old. I mean, when I was a kid, you didn't have to worry about your kids playing in the street outside. Now I would never let my kids play by themselves outside. Never would. It's like a night and day difference from when I was a kid to now. And especially within the family systems. I mean,
yeah, I mean, Columbine happened after then, and all this other stuff. So it's
it's
like,
never been the same. I'm
yeah,
almost convinced that Y2K was just a series of turning it all upside down or something.
yeah. It's so yeah. I mean, there's a lot of work to go and a lot of people to talk to try to get change, but there's definitely going to be a lot of pushback that I can't directly as to why, but some people know as to why there's going to be and where that pushback would come from. But yeah, I mean, this is a thing that is important, and I don't think you should. I don't think anyone who hears this or listens should have had to gone through it personally or known someone that's gone through it or have a sister that's gone through it or a friend that's gone through it to care, because it's like it's just think about it as just a humanity thing. Does someone deserve to
I
be
mean, we've seen it so many times. I mean, okay, I just had a thought because I was thinking about it and I'm like, Caitlin came from a very well-off family. I mean, mother was a preschool director. My daughter went to that preschool for all the 3 years that she, from 2 until she was ready to go to kindergarten. She was the director at this preschool for a very long time, and her dad was like an architect, engineer. They come from a very, very wonderful family. I mean, her parents are wonderful. This wasn't a sense, just this isn't like a poverty level problem. This is like this can happen to anyone. We've had a sheriff where this was an involvement. Like we've had people in the court system that they've had domestic violence incidents happen with their spouse. We've seen this so many times in higher level people and lower level people. It's definitely not that type of an issue, and I wish people would be a little more open-minded about that. Most people will think that it's like, it's probably like people that are just not so great people. They probably are on drugs, or they probably they just immediately assume that they're lower class people, and that's just not it. It's just that the lower class people don't have the same resources that they do to get out of the situation. That's the difference.
yeah.
And the other ones you don't really hear about as much. They kind of get squashed under the rug pretty fast. So,
Yeah,
but like Gabby Petito was a really great example on that. She very clearly was in distress. She was very clearly dealing with an abuser. If you would have listened to her story and his story, and if people were trained properly and could listen to both sides of those stories, you would have very, very clearly seen which one was the problem. Very clear. I mean, the first time I saw the was it the body camera footage from the officer, and just that situation, that's just one that caught nationwide attention in the last year. But that whole situation, and then you see, what does his family do? Help him get away with it.
Yeah, that typically is how that happens when people have money. They'll just throw the money around to make things go away, and people unfortunately listen.
And maybe that's the real reason why nobody wants these laws to change, because then it'll make it a little too easy for people to not be able to get away with these things. I'm just saying. I don't know anything. I don't know nothing about that.
Yeah, that would be a reason. I should bite my tongue. I'm not going to say what I want to say about that, but
yeah, we'll keep it very neutral.
Before we do wrap up, was there anything else you wanted to add or talk about, or tell people where they could find Caitlin's Law, or any information about domestic violence and how to help?
Yes. We have a Facebook page, Caitlin's Law, and it's spelled CAITLINS. It's got a purple ribbon, and it'll have a hashtag that says "Get Out." That was actually an inside joke between me and our group of friends with Caitlin, that ended up being the thing that we wanted to hashtag to get it out there. So that's the whole idea, is we want to get this message out there. We want to get everybody evened out in the state with this one tiny little change. I would love to have some more editors on our Facebook page. If we have some people that would like to share statistics and information, we could always use some help with posting. I'm not super great at social media. I actually kind of hate it now. I used to love it. I used to sit on it all day. Now I'm just kind of like, oh, I hate it. It's like such a chore. So I could always use some help with that. If anybody wants to join and volunteer, I'm happy to send some information, some volunteer sheets, and get them submitted for you. If you need extra resources or help with anything, our inbox is always open. Emails are also open if you'd like to share your story anonymously. There's tons of different things that we want to do, and it's more so just having our page to be visible and to remain relevant. And the more exposure you get, we know how these algorithms work. The more exposure and shares you get, the more reach you get. So that's really it. Just interact with it, share it, like the page, send us stories, things that can kind of keep it relevant and in the news. And I will definitely get better about posting on Facebook.
And then
still doing it in the background. I'm just not posting about it all the time.
Yeah, it's this is definitely a difficult topic to talk about, but it's definitely something we should keep talking about and try to see what can be done to make a change, because it needs to happen, and it's not that difficult. It's just there are roadblocks that are in the way. But yeah, we'll definitely be in touch, and we will.
Good. Thank you so much. I so appreciate it.
No problem at all.